Captain Marvel doesn't learn anything. Okay, well, she learns a few things. She learns, spoilers by the way, about her past and where she came from. She learns that blue people bad and green people good. And she learns that this woman needs to be punched in the face. But she doesn't learn anything that makes her grow. In the whole film, while she does go through a lot, none of it seems to really impact her emotionally. Nothing she experiences really seems to make her go through any emotional growth or character development. And I really do think that's a shame, because we could have had a lot better. Right? Introduction. Captain Marvel had the potential to be a really big deal. It was marketed to death. We knew going into it that it was probably going to be important to Endgame in some way. And Carol Danvers, as played by Cheese Theft, I know that joke isn't as clever as I think it is the first MCU lead hero to possess the Vajunga. But I'm pretty sure at this point the majority of people who went to see it left the theatre thinking that it could best be described as... Basically, what I'm saying is, it seems like wasted potential. So over the course of this video, I'm going to be essentially pitching a fix, bringing up some of the problems I think the film suffers from, and talking about how you could potentially fix those problems if you were to give the film another draft. Which, obviously, you can't now, it's out. But, how exactly could you improve the characterization of Carol Danvers in Captain Marvel? Other than by, adding some. But before we get into the fixes, let's get into the problems, shall we? Where the film falls flat. I want you to imagine for a moment a story about two people who really, really hate each other. Let's call them Dave and Dongle Sploon. Now, Dongle Sploon has really, really poor eyesight, but he doesn't normally wear his glasses because he thinks they make him look like a nerd. He's right. And this just sort of results in him not really being able to see most of the time. Like, he just can't see anything. One day, Dongle Sploon breaks into Dave's house and just starts punching the shit out of Dave. Because, he just hates Dave that much and isn't mature enough to solve his problems with words. At this point, the person he's punching says, "I'm not Dave. You've got the wrong house. Dave lives next door." And Dongle Sploon is like, "Oh shit, I'm just gonna go next door and punch Dave instead. Sorry about this. You see, I'm supposed to wear glasses, but I don't like them. I think they make me look like a nerd, so I don't wear them." And that's why this happened. And then Dongle Sploon leaves the house of the person he thought was Dave to go and actually beat up Dave. And he didn't learn anything as a result. The closest thing that Captain Marvel has to an arc is pretty similar. At the beginning of the movie, she's all about the Kree. We learn she's been a loyal soldier of theirs for 6 years, and regularly does a pew-pew on the Skrulls. Then, in a pivotal scene, she learns that the Kree have been lying to her about her past for those 6 years. And then my green boy here explains to her that actually the Skrulls are fine, and it's the Kree who really suck.
"I saw the ruins on Torfa."
Ruins that the accusers are responsible for. My people lived as refugees on Torfa.
After being told this, it takes her 40 seconds to completely switch sides, abandon the only life she remembers having, and join the Skrull cause. And then, in the climax of the movie, she fights against the Kree. After that assumedly very difficult 40-second decision to completely change her entire life and join the people that up until now she's considered her mortal enemies, she doesn't seem that bothered by the fact she's left her old life behind to fight against her former allies. Not a great arc, IMO. We also have this moment towards the end of the film where Jude Law is like, "Fight me without your powers. I bet you can't win." And Captain Marvel's like, "Lol," and just does the pew on him. After she shoots him, we get this line from her.
"I have nothing to prove to you."
This feels like it's there to be the payoff to an arc, but it's not an arc that she ever went through. At no point in the film did she give off the impression that she felt she had anything to prove to Jude Law. There was all that stuff in the beginning where he told her that she needed to control her emotion, but we never really saw how she felt about that. She never really seemed to take it that seriously. So this doesn't really work as an arc.
You struggle with your emotions, with your past which fuels them.
Oh hey, are we about to explore that, or see how it makes her feel when she's told this?
You are just one victim of the Skrull expansion.
No, we're gonna change the subject. Consider that character trait established, I guess. Yeah, this is all we get. In short, the character development she gets is minimal. The internal conflict that she's clearly supposed to be going through lasts a grand total of 40 seconds, and excluding those 40 seconds where she does get a bit flustered, nothing really seems to impact her emotionally in this film, which makes her much harder to relate to. These are definitely things I'd consider problems, so if you'd care to join me, let's talk about how to fix it. There are 3 main parts of the movie that I'm going to suggest changes to. The beginning, especially the part where Captain Marvel goes on a mission with the Kree Star Force, Captain Marvel's relationship with Nick Fury, and a lot of the stuff that happens after Captain Marvel finds out the truth about the Kree. Let's start with the beginning, shall we? Because, you know, that makes fucking sense. Like The Real Thing, in this redraft we start on Hala, only this version of Hala is much more overt about just sort of having a problem with Skrulls, like as a concept. Like, they do not like Skrulls. As we see stuff like war propaganda against the Skrulls, and you also have lines of dialogue between the different members of the Star Force that convey this fear of Skrulls. Picture something along the lines of, "The Skrulls are a people who evolved to deceive. You can't trust them, it's in their blood." Although, you know, keep it subtle, nothing too overt, don't have them going, "You know what I think's a good idea? Genocide?" You know, subtlety is good. At this point, we still do want the audience to be wondering, wow, are the Skrulls really that bad? Rather than going, you know, the Kree kind of are reminding me a little bit of, This is by no means the only way to do things, but I'll be explaining why I'm making the exact changes that I am making as I go. Otherwise, I'd just sort of be like writing fan fiction and then going, I like this better. But you know, I'm going to be talking about what it is I think the version I'm pitching achieves that the original version doesn't. For instance, I'm suggesting this change to give us more context when Carol is having her big revelations. In her life so far, she will have accepted all of this anti-Skrull stuff, and we can show that. But the events of the film will get her to learn and see everything in a new light. It gives us the opportunity to have her switch sides, not because she realizes the Kree are evil when she finds out all of this bad stuff that they're doing, but because she realizes the Kree are evil when she realizes the things they're doing are bad. She's not just going to be presented new information, the events of the story are going to cause her to learn and grow as a character. Now that we've got our initial setting established, we can get into the story beats. And in this version of the story, Carol isn't told that she got her powers given to her by the Kree. Instead, she's told that they're natural, and she's incredibly lucky to have them. I don't think this is inherently better or anything, it's just necessary to what I'm about to pitch, which is a change to the scene of banter we get between Carol and the rest of the Star Force while they're heading out to their mission. We can still keep the banter that we actually got in that scene, but we also get a few lines from the other members of Star Force that communicate that they think that they've worked much harder to get to where they are than Carol has, and that Carol's only good enough to be on Star Force because of her special powers, which she didn't have to work for. You can also show that this gets to her with a couple of reaction shots. Following this, when they're actually on their mission, Carol can try to prove herself by taking on an opponent without using her powers, hoping to prove the members of her squad who doubted her abilities wrong. But in doing this, she messes things up and her squad gets captured. This serves to first of all further demonstrate that this criticism actually really gets to her, starting her on an arc of learning to accept herself, which means by the end of the film, after she's grown as a person, her saying this,
I have nothing to prove to you,
has much more of an impact. It secondly serves to lead into a scene where all of the Star Force squad have been captured, and in this scene, while they do blame Carol for getting them captured because, you know, it's her fault, we can also really show their camaraderie by giving them a sort of we're all in this together sort of an attitude, further fleshing out the life that Carol eventually has to decide to leave behind, thus making that decision more impactful when she finally makes it. Now, for the rest of the plot to happen, the rest of Star Force need to escape and Carol needs to remain in captivity. I'm not really going to talk about the details of that because there are, you know, thousands of ways that could happen. So, you know, in short, the rest of Star Force escapes, they don't manage to get Carol out with them. So now we have the foundation of an emotional arc. We saw her make a mistake and we understand the emotions that she was feeling that led to her making that mistake. So we have a way for her to grow moving forward, which brings me to changes I'd make to the middle. So we've now got two ways that Carol needs to change by the end of the story. The first is she needs to get over the emotional insecurities that led to her making that mistake on her mission, and the second one is that she needs to realize what the Kree are doing is kind of bad, and we can work towards those destinations for her character through her relationship with Nick Fury. It's not enough to just have her change as a character, we need to build towards that change or it won't feel earned. So in order to earn that change, and do a couple of other things I'll get to later, here are 3 things I'm going to change about Carol and Nick's relationship. The first thing that Nick Fury needs to do is say things that sow the seeds of doubt about the Kree in Carol's mind. This doesn't just have to come from him, but he's as good a place as any to get it. Basically use his perspective as an outsider from the Kree to expand Carol's perspective. The second thing he needs to do is say stuff to her that helps her overcome her insecurities she demonstrated at the beginning. They don't have to have some kind of super deep, serious talk about it or anything. He just needs to provide some kind of insight through his words and or actions. And the final thing is just make them bond. This isn't important yet, but it will be important later on. Basically just remember Carol and Nick have really bonded in this version. The specifics of how they bond isn't really important to what I'm doing here, and there are lots of possibilities for it, so let's just leave it at that. But it would be best if it was related to the arcs she was already going through. Think things along the lines of he provides a valuable new perspective from outside the Kree, or he offers some advice that helps her deal with her earlier failure. You can also show her being surprised that she's getting along so well with someone who isn't a Kree, which goes a long way to showing her previously flawed and narrow-minded perspective evolving into a more open-minded one.
She previously thought that only the Kree could be cool, but as it turns out, other people can be cool too.
Okay, so we've covered the beginning of the film, we've briefly touched on the middle. Can you guess what change I'm going to recommend to the ending? Don't have Captain Marvel take 40 seconds to change her entire worldview and make a life-changing decision. Like, this didn't really bother me on first viewing, but the more I think about it, the more I'm like, no, that's not how, like, real people work. Like, when's the last time you presented someone with new evidence and they changed their entire worldview? Like, after Captain Marvel receives the revelation that the Kree kidnapped her, she gets the speech from Talos like she does in the actual movie, where he says he only wants to live in peace. Only in this version, Captain Marvel basically already knows everything she's being told, since in this version the Kree are much more overt about their Skrull hate. Maria and Nick ask Carol if what Talos is saying is actually true, and Carol doesn't deny it. But she's not ready to change sides just like that, so she starts trying to make excuses for the Kree. The Skrulls have killed so many of us! Yeah, but you're in a war, you dumb shithead. Like, that's how wars work. You don't get it, but we're the good guys, they're bad! Stop trying to make it sound like that's not how it is. This drives these characters apart. Nick and Maria stick with Talos and help him get to Mar-Vell's lab. Carol reunites with Starforce. And now that our protagonists are separated and emotionally invested, we're ready for a much more emotionally charged finale. Before we get to it though, it's worth pointing out that we do need to shift some plot stuff around to make this work. In the original movie, Talos is only able to find Mar-Vell's lab because he gets Carol's help. But obviously in this version he's not going to get that because she's just stormed off to go and reunite with Starforce. So we need to shuffle some stuff around so Talos can still get to Mar-Vell's lab. Basically all we need to shift around is the information that the different characters have. Just make it so that all Talos needs is some coordinates and that both Carol and Nick know these coordinates by this point. Now Nick can give Talos the coordinates and everything's good to go. Okay, so now that's out of the way, we can get to the finale. Like in the original movie, Talos goes up to find his Skrull buddies, only this time Carol only joins them when Starforce gets there. She, with Starforce, start rounding up the Skrulls. Jude Law insists that they also take out Maria and Nick since they're allies of the Skrulls, and Maria, Nick and Talos plead with Carol to help them. Carol at this point is clearly incredibly conflicted. Carol has been nudged in the direction of doubting the Kree throughout this entire movie, and now that's all coming to fruition. Her memories of her friendship with Maria keep coming back, and she's very recently bonded with Nick Fury a lot, and seeing a member of Starforce going to go and kill those two is what finally pushes Carol over the edge. She turns on her former friends, Starforce, and it's very clearly not easy for her, but she does it. And for the rest of the movie it can basically play out like it played out in the original, only with more feelings. Because, you know, she's finally deciding to turn on the friends she's had for as long as she can remember to stand up for what she now thinks is right. It's gonna be a pretty emotionally draining experience. And finally, we can still get our I don't have to prove anything to you payoff, but this time it actually means something because her character has had to grow to get to that point. So there you have it. Just a few suggestions on how you could give Captain Marvel an emotionally driven character arc, hopefully making her more relatable and more compelling. But now I must go. Someone on the internet has made a video about why Darkseid is better than Thanos, and I can't fucking let that stand. So before I go, I'd like to say a huge thanks to my patrons. I'd also like to ask what you thought of this, because it's very different from what I normally make. This really is my first attempt at making content like this, so please do let me know if you enjoyed it or if you didn't and why. Other than that, I'll be seeing you on Wednesday. I don't know what for yet, but it should be fun. Goodbye. Also give her back her hair from the comics because it was way better. That's how you really fix this movie.